Okay, let's move on. A bit quiet, please. Order. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, which is the item 7, the Southwark Plan. We've asked Councillor Williams and officers to come along this evening to discuss the Southwark Plan, obviously an incredibly important document that have an impact on this borough for many years into the future. So, as is usually the case, Councillor Williams, it would be good if you could give us an introduction on this item, and then we will go into questions from the committee.
Excellent. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. And there is at least one person watching the webcast. I've seen actually live tweeting this evening's proceedings. So the new Southwark Plan, which is in your papers this evening, is the main planning document for the borough, which sets out what kind of development we want to see happen where and to what standard right across Southwark over the next 15 years from the period when this is adopted. And as you were saying, Chair, those buildings and those changes that are made will be in place for many, many years, decades, if not hopefully hundreds of years if we get it right. The plan itself, we've changed the format of it from previous planning documents that the council have done to make it more straightforward and hopefully more easier to understand for non-technical specialists and non-planners, which is the audience we're trying to reach, the residents of the borough. And it's also themed along the lines of our Fairer Future promises, which is what the whole council and Councillor Colley was talking about this earlier. Is we're really trying to embed in right across the council, because that's the basis on which this administration was elected, and that's how we want to communicate and organise ourselves, and that applies to this planning document as well. I'll just draw out a few of the main policies and then kind of open it up for questions. Really important one, and it's the first policy, is around affordable homes. And just to confirm, this administration sees affordable homes. We want to see a mixture of intermediate homes, 30% on developments, shared ownership, shared equity, etc. But we want to see the other 70% as being affordable rent homes. When we say affordable rent, we mean social rent, so genuinely affordable homes, not the definition the government have brought in and have ripped up the definition of what affordable truly is. And just this week and last week, with the Housing and Planning Bill going through its third reading in the Commons and unfortunately passing, just ripping up that definition of affordable homes even more with the introduction of starter homes, which I know this committee's looked at as part of your work on right to buy. Also, we want more family-sized homes, so we're increasing the percentage of family-sized homes that we want to see delivered in our regeneration areas, such as the Elephant and Castle, and indeed right across the borough. There's also new policies around the private rented sector. As you all know, in Southwark we've got about a quarter of our residents living in the PRS. Most of those are in homes, houses, leasehold council flats. We don't really have any large-scale institutional private rented sector developments. We've got lots of people coming and talking to us about potentially building those in the borough. It's something that we are interested in, because we think there is a place in Southwark for high-quality, high-standard, well-managed, well-maintained private rented homes. So there's more choice of people that aren't eligible for social housing support, but also aren't yet able to buy a home of their own. So that's something that's in there, but it's been very clear that any private rented sector homes built in the borough have to be a high standard of both maintenance and management, well designed, and that's something that we're very keen on. Also, further clarification on our policy around those in housing needs who have specialist needs. So on wheelchair units, where wheelchair units are secured as part of the social housing offer, if they're not taken up, that they're held and used by temporary accommodation households, while we find a household to move in there permanently. We're also potentially looking at whether we can have more flexibility in how private wheelchair homes and disabled unit homes are acquired and secured through the planning process, and potentially use that money elsewhere to build more social rented disabled homes. We're also continuing our commitment to a high standard of design in all residential developments. There's also a slight amendment to our tall buildings policy, which focuses the tall buildings, rather than being a set height of 30 metres or more, it's more about how that tall building or taller building sits within its context, rather than having an absolute height when that policy kicks in. We're also bringing in 6 new protected borough views. You may know that there's the local London View Management Framework, the LVMF rather, which has a protected view from the Serpentine, etc., and of St Paul's from Blackheath. but this is about protecting those local views in Southwark that are important to our residents. I can see the chair nodding. There's the view north from One Tree Hill, there's the view from Nunhead Cemetery at the top of the hill looking out into St Paul's, and there's others, one from Camberwell up to St Paul's as well, one from close to May Hart. So there's a range of those that we're bringing in to protect those for future residents. And the last two that I'll mention is our preferred industrial locations, that we are going to be removing their designation and moving to more mixed-use developments, for example on Parkhouse Street and along the Old Kent Road. But rather than just going for a straight, these are industrial locations to these are residential locations or mixed-use locations, we want to see a transitional period, so that we can manage how those sites come forward, so that we can protect employment in the borough and actually increase employment in the borough on those sites, whilst also delivering the homes that we need. And also there's policies around bringing more railway arches into use. As you may know, we've got well over 800 railway arches dotted across the borough. I think it'd be fair to say in the past they've been viewed as a problem, that they cut across the borough, they separate communities, they create sometimes quite noisy barriers, but actually we've got 800 vaults, we've got 800 arches here that can be used for employment, for workspace, for job space, for cafes and restaurants, etc. Which we want to see more of those in use, and we're working with Network Rail to do so. And that links us to my final point, which is on the low line, which was an idea that came out of Better Bankside. And the low line routes we're really excited about. Ties in Team London Bridge. I do apologise. To basically help our regeneration work to bring more of those people who are walking, those many millions of people who walk along the south bank of the Thames, pull them further into Southwark. As we all know, it's only a relatively short walk from the river down to the Elephant. So the low line walking routes will be three. One will run from the borough boundary by Waterloo East all the way down to Maltby Street Road Walk, and potentially further on to down to Spa Terminus, and that will open up a pedestrian route along the railway viaduct with shops, cafes, restaurants, bars, workspace, etc. along there, an interesting public realm as you go down. The second one is going to run from Blackfriars all the way down through the Elephant, Woolworth to Camberwell. The first section of that, actually Spare Street, is now up and running and is open, and we've been working with Hotel Elephant and Reuben Powell on that. And the final one is one we're really excited about, which has quite possibly got us the most amount of positive press coverage the council has ever got for saying we'll support it. Is the Peckham Coal Line, which is a fantastic idea that's emerged from the local community, and Nick and the team down there, which is absolutely fantastic, and bringing some of that disused coal line back into use and other bits of local open space. So those are the three low line routes we're going to be supporting, and it all ties in with our wider aims in this plan to really embed our public health duties into planning policy to make the borough a healthier place for everybody.
Good, thank you. And I'll go straight to the committee for questions. So I've had Rebecca, Ben and Catherine so far. If anybody else wants to indicate, please do. Rebecca.
Can I get away with two?
You can.
Thank you. So the first one, it's good to see that we've put in here about protection for pubs, especially with the work that we've been doing in Southwark around the Rose and Crown, which we were about to lose as a pub, and we've managed to get them to retain it. But have we got any ideas about if places can't be kept as pubs, whether they should be designated as other types of community use rather than necessarily turning into shops or some other sort of community? So you don't necessarily have to have a pub, but you could have a cafe or a microbrewery or a similar kind of use that still retains that kind of community focus point.
I don't think we've gone into that level of detail. There is quite clear policies in there that if a building that's currently a pub goes into another use, if that is agreed to, that any cellarage, for example, has to be protected so that it could be brought back into use as a pub in the future. But this is where I think our planning policies work very nicely with asset community value status, which has helped save, working with local community groups, 4 or 5 pubs in the last year alone dotted across the borough. So I think it's the combination of having the clear planning policies in here, having a very proactive approach and spotting those opportunities where we can save pubs and working with local community groups to save them, and having all bits of the council working together.
Okay. And then my second question was around the kind of wheelchair accessible properties. Obviously at the moment, with our private intermediate homes, when they're not sold on, they go onto the open market to be resold as normal houses. That's if they're not sold as wheelchair homes, that's right?
Yeah.
is there actually the demand for 10% of all our properties to be wheelchair accessible, or are we always going to have homes that are not being able to be sold as wheelchair accessible, or we just don't have that number of people who want to access those homes? And in which case, should we be changing our policy to reduce the number and therefore increase the number of affordable homes instead? As a result, we can increase our affordable home numbers.
So I think with wheelchair accessible homes is we know there's a need, and a very real need, for wheelchair accessible homes for social rented homes, and that's absolutely there, and that's something that's growing. On the private sale wheelchair homes, a lot of developers have struggled to sell them because the demand isn't there so much. So what has been happening is some of those what are wheelchair units, wide corridors, etc., of design features have been sold just generally privately. And the approach that we're leading towards in this document, and some of the changes, and interested in using it in more detail in writing, but is that where potentially rather than taking those private wheelchair units, we could say, well, hang on a second, don't deliver that private wheelchair unit there because we don't think there's a demand at the moment, but instead give us an in-lieu payment, and then we can use that money to build an additional social rented wheelchair or other specialist need housing as council housing, and where we know there is the need. So we're looking at being flexible, but it is interesting that we know there's a demand out there for private and social, but the private ones aren't being taken up for whatever reason. So anything we can do to help deliver more social rented homes and to have those the correct adaptations, I think is something we're looking at.
And we mentioned here that that they need to be kind of advertised properly, and are we going to be working with developers then as part of that to make sure they are actually doing it and are getting the best reach they can for advertising those homes?
Yeah, so the onus will be on through the Section 106 and the developers to do that rather than us, because the team are very busy, and as Fiona mentioned earlier, Councillor Colley mentioned earlier in budget discussion, budgets are only going one way at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah, the onus is on the developer for the Section 106, and that is followed up and checks on.
Thank you.
Ben.
Thank you for coming along. It's a really interesting, important document, and actually I did find it quite easy to read, which is
excellent.
Good. I have two very unrelated questions. The first is around affordable housing. So there's two policies in here which I really strongly agree with, which is we will not accept affordable rent on page 23, and then, if I understand it correctly, on page 14, not permitting starter homes where conventional housing would be acceptable under the policies of this plan. I had a question around enforcement, or how this relates to the existing policy, because, for example, as you know, there is affordable rent in the borough. I have affordable rent in my ward, and that wasn't agreed by the planning committee. It came through in the Section 106 agreement. Similarly with starter homes.
Is that specifically around the exchange?
This is the exchange, Notting Hill, exactly. Yeah. Similar with the starter homes, that this is a flagship government policy, which I think certainly I oppose. I think all of us around this table probably oppose. To sell a flat at 80% of 450,000 is not affordable for our residents. Will this document allow those of us who set up the planning committee to reject an application if it says that their affordable homes are starter homes, or if they suggest affordable rents?
I'll depress you even more in a moment if you've read the Housing and Planning Bill as it currently reads. So just on the exchange, just to clarify, we took legal advice, and the advice was, those who aren't aware of this, the exchange, there should have been 44 social rent units delivered by Notting Hill. They didn't, they went as affordable rents. We took legal advice, and the legal advice was that if we took it to court, we'd lose. So we said to Notting Hill, give us our 44 social rent units. You can't do them at the exchange because you've got tenants in and they've been advertised at those rent levels. We want our 44 social rent units. So we got 34 additional social rent units at the Manor Place scheme from memory, and we're still pushing Notting Hill to get the additional 10 social rent units because we want them, because that's what the committee agreed, that's what we want. So just on that one, just to clarify, and we are currently looking at how we can tighten up our monitoring processes right across the borough. To make sure that what is being consented as social rent, or whatever rent level, is delivered. One thing that we have done to be pragmatic in the last couple of years is where developers have come in, or housing associations or others have come in with proposals for affordable rent properties of anywhere up to 80% of market rent, which in pretty much the whole borough, that's not affordable. Anyway, we'd understand it. is to say, well, look, if we're going to have some affordable rent here, because the way that GLA and various other grants work with the strings that are attached to them, is to say, fine, let's get them capped at the local housing allowance for the 1 and the 2 beds, but the 3 and the 4 and the family size units, they absolutely must be social rent units. So we've kind of held the tide back as much as we can there. Unfortunately, because of the funding environment we're in and the way that the grants dished out basically by the GLA, that there's those conditions attached that they won't fund social rent in some circumstances. We've tried to be as pragmatic as we can to secure as much properly affordable housing as possible. And we've got one of the best records in the country of delivering affordable homes and social rent homes. On starter homes more generally, and I was brushing up on this yesterday, the housing and planning bill is actually quite draconian, and any talk of localism from the government is a complete sham, because they're saying starter homes that will be capped at £450,000 in London at 20% below their market value. And you had the, I've forgotten his first name, Mr Redfern, who's the CEO of Taylor Wimpey, was saying yesterday, well, the government haven't said how you're going to calculate that, what the role for local authorities and that, so even the developers are saying, you know, what the hell's going on. But that the Secretary of State will be able to direct us, or direct you as the planning committee, for those of you on planning committee, to ignore our own planning policies if they aren't helping to deliver starter homes. So you could have the government could override us. Absolutely crazy, and is completely unhelpful for tackling our local housing need. Hopefully, as it goes through the House of Lords, amendments will be made that means that we'll have that flexibility to assess our own local housing need and meet that need. We do think there's a place for low-cost home ownership, and maybe in some isolated circumstances somewhere in the country start